Today I want to talk about 4 uncommon networking tips. There is no shortage of discussion around the importance of networking, but there's often less focus on what to do when you are actually at a networking event. And today I want to share the things that not enough people are talking about. So grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. The tips that I'm going to share in this episode I discovered in Leo Lowndes' book, How to Talk to Anyone. When I read this book, I absolutely fell in love with just how engaging it was. It shares over 90 tips on how to talk to people, but the ones that I'm going to share today are just the ones that resonated the most with me, that were my favorite relating to networking. And in the next episode, I'm going to share more tips as well. So this is going to be a 2-part episode on networking tips. So let's dive into tip number 1. Tip number 1 is have a flooding smile. This is the first tip in the book, and Lowndes really gives you the smile coaching that you didn't even realize that you needed. In the book, she says, big winners know their smile is one of their most powerful weapons, so they've fine-tuned it for maximum impact. So this isn't about just flashing your smile to anyone that looks your way. It's about actually mastering a flooding smile, or what she calls a flooding smile. So when you think about when you see someone who has a pasted on grin, for example, then there is sometimes this feeling of insincerity around it. It doesn't come across as genuine. Whereas a flooding smile is this idea of your smile washing over your face like a wave, and not just being pasted on, not just feeling inauthentic, because it comes across your face in a natural way. So even just that ability to wait, a few milliseconds before you smile, then that is going to create more sincerity in your interaction with someone. And I would add that this isn't about just also thinking about your flooding smile. This is about actually smiling when the occasion calls for it. And that comes across just so much more genuine to the person that you are interacting with. What I did find surprising as well was that studies show that women who are slower to smile in corporate life are perceived as more credible. Tip number 2 for your networking event is to engage your sticky eyes. Now, we're talking about secret weapons, so we've talked about your smile, but the other secret weapon that How to Talk to Anyone has mentioned is your sticky eyes. It says brilliantly that your eyes are personal grenades that have the power to detonate people's emotions. So to be clear, this goes beyond generic advice about eye contact, because in a certain context, that might not actually be appropriate. For example, in some cultures, it is perceived as being threatening to have too intense eye contact. It can just be inappropriate for the scenario that you are in to have really intense eye contact. So this is more about the idea of, in the right context, sticky eyes being described as a warm toffee. So when you are, for example, engaged in a conversation and you are speaking to someone, it is not about just moving away from that person's gaze as soon as they stop speaking. It is about peeling away your attention like that warm toffee to really show that you were completely engaged in what that person was saying. It's not about constantly just looking around for someone else to speak to at the networking event, or what your next thing is that you might be focused on. It's just about actually fully giving that person attention and then slowly moving away from that in not such a dramatic way. And interestingly as well, research has shown that the more eye contact, the more positive emotions. And eye contact can increase heart rates, and it can also shoot this adrenaline-like substance through our veins. So our body has a physiological response to eye contact. My uncommon tip number 3 for your networking event is to wear a what's it. Now you're probably wondering, what is a what's it? And that is the point. It is to get people to start to ask questions. Now, the idea of a what's it, which How to Talk to Anyone proposes, is to either wear or carry something that just sparks a little bit of interest. Now, this can be as loud or as subtle as you choose it to be based on just your general personal brand style or the context of the event and what's appropriate. that you are going to. It can be things like, for example, an interesting tie or the purse that you're carrying. But essentially, the purpose of a what's it is to have something that acts as an easy conversation starter for people. It's an easy opening, so that in networking events where it can often be a little bit awkward when you don't know who you're going to talk to, or who you can approach, and if you can potentially start a conversation with those people, then a what's it allows you to be able to potentially have people come to you and to start that conversation. So particularly if you struggle at networking events, or if you are a really introverted person, then maybe this is something that you could try and see if it allows you to start up more conversations and to meet more people just with these subtle openings that you give them. My tip number 4 is to not ask the question, what do you do? So this is the really common question that pops up at networking events. It's probably one of the most popular questions at a networking event, especially when you meet someone that you haven't actually met before. But what How to Talk to Anyone proposes is that it can actually be a really crass question, and that people who are what she describes as big winners don't actually ask this question. And I have to say that even in my own personal experiences, I have found that the more successful the person, the less they ask this question, because they are less concerned with trying to put you in a box and to understand where you fit. And they are more concerned with trying to establish a genuine relationship with you outside of what your title might be or what your career or work might be. And they can talk to you for a really long time without any of this coming up, if it comes up at all. What I really love about How to Talk to Anyone is that it highlights why this can be a really careless question. Because while the person who you are speaking to, who is at this networking event, may have wanted to attend that event, they perhaps didn't want to necessarily talk a lot about what they do for work. Maybe they are someone who has recently lost their job. Maybe they are focusing on being a full-time parent. Maybe they have gotten to a position in their life where they don't even need to work anymore, so they don't necessarily want to be asked what they do for work. Or maybe they are someone who has a job that is not necessarily something that can be easily explained or understood to other people, and they don't necessarily want to be discussing that with people who may not understand it. So the idea of removing this phrase from your language is about just really creating an opportunity to establish a genuine relationship with people outside of having to put them into this particular box, because most likely it's going to naturally come about anyway. And one of the ways that Lowndes suggests replacing this question is to more focus on asking that person how they spend their time and seeing where that conversation potentially takes you. For more tips from the book How to Talk to Anyone, then check out my previous episode on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.